with Richard Pullman.
All right, so we're back with SSB. We're back to talk about a lot of things. It wasn't enough last time, so we got...
You get more of me.
Get more, and we wanted to talk about bad RPGs, but before that I want to say that it's been like 2 days since the last podcast, and in that time I've installed this Licks program.
And utterly failed at it. Just 100%. I told you there was a learning curve. I warned you that there's a learning curve.
You could say it's a learning curve, and you could say I failed at it, or you could say that it's not designed for human beings to use.
I'm a human being last time I checked, so let me check
You're
again.
at least
Hold on.
like half computer or something like that if you can do that shit, because it doesn't make any sense.
Well, I'm a programmer at heart, so it's like second nature for me.
Yeah, I just want to say, we were hyping up Licks last time because I didn't know what
I
it was.
hyping it up because I like it. It's a great system. It's excellent. But like I said before, there is a learning curve. If you don't feel like you can just pick up something and learn it like that, or you don't, if you're not a very good problem solver, you're not going to figure out Licks very easily. It's just like learning. It's like learning a programming language, except it's a little bit easier because it's actual. There's no like. Instead of like integers and shit, it's like tables.
Yeah. So if you're wondering what kind of learning curve there is, I was imagining learning curve like, anything. Like Photoshop has a learning curve. Anything has a learning curve. But this is the kind of learning curve where if you want to change the color of your font, you have to learn a programming language. So to me, that's just
font. Like it's just font color. Like
I'm exaggerating, but I just don't want people to get the idea that it's as easy as I thought it was going to be, because it turns out you're a lot smarter than me, and you actually have the ability to figure this shit out.
That's not true even a little bit, but all right, whatever then.
All right, let's move on to bad RPGs, because we were talking... I was trying to say Dungeons & Dragons was an example of a bad RPG.
No, Dungeons & Dragons is a 5.5, like I said before. Let's roll into... Let me actually pull... I have a list. I'm going to start off with a really egregious game now. I'm going to preface this as... I'm going to give you why it's bad first, and then I'm going to say the game's name. So the reason it's bad is because it's barely a game, okay? Mm-hmm. There's a game called A Place to Fuck Each Other, okay? I'm not sure if anybody... Have you heard of this game?
I have not, somehow.
All right, let me see if I can pull up either... Yeah. It's made by somebody who... I'm going to pull up her... Is this... What is... I'm trying to find her blog or whatever.
It's got to have a home page, right? Yeah,
that's... There we go. I just downloaded the PDF. Fuck it. Okay, so A Place to Fuck Each Other. I'm just going to read the first paragraph of the introduction. A Place to Fuck Each Other is a game about queer women and their relationships that they tentatively build within new spaces. The spotlight moves through a cluster of lovers as they play slice-of-life scenes and hookups about hooking up and moving in. It's a game about hope, disillusionment, and attempt to create a healthy queer space. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying I don't really give a shit about gender, whatever. If you want to be trans, gay, straight, queer, third gender, whatever, who gives a shit? I personally don't. The reason that I call this game a bad game, because it's really not a game. It's basically a way for, because there's no dice whatsoever. You have three things. You have three stats. Your name, your astrological sign. Sorry, 4 stats, because it's, well, I guess 5. I'll read them out. Your name, your astrological sign, your hairstyle, which I found very odd to specify that out specifically. A tendency you have, or something you're coping. Yeah, or something you're coping with. So yeah, so it's 4. So you write these things on a Sharpie, and then you role play that character. If you read more through the game, it's like, well, you can stop when you feel uncomfortable. So it's one of those, like, because you could probably get into actual graphic, like, super graphic sex scenes with people around this table. Now, again, I think anybody can stop, but this is basically a non-game. This is basically a way for people to talk about this stuff through game. It's not a role-playing game.
No,
it's really not. There's no dice. There's no game aspect.
Well,
unless
it's basically freeform, right? I mean,
it's pretty freeform, yeah. And basically
with a subject.
Yeah, it's freeform with a subject, so it's not really an RPG. There's no conflict and there's no reward for success because you can't really judge success like that's not.
Well, I guess if you get laid, it's a success. But what's to stop you?
I mean,
there's no resolution.
There's
mechanic.
not really. There's no resolution mechanic. And I'm not gonna get deep into it because there's a whole lot more this game talks about. But it's only 16 pages, so you know.
I'm hoping people will listen past this point and see what the other games are. Is what I'm hoping.
It's Googleable, so do that. The second game I wanted to bring up, alright, so I'm gonna hit y'all with a classic. This one is probably going to be very obvious on my list of shitty games, is D20 Modern. So ways of D20, how much time do we have exactly, by the way?
You have to shorten it down to, see if you can fit it into 5 minutes or so.
I can do 10, maybe 15. Let's get started. Okay, so D20 Modern. D20 Modern is for those of you that don't know what D20 Modern is, take D&D 3.0, put a modern paint on it, that's D20 Modern. The reason it's bad is the mechanics, primarily. The subject matter it's modern, whatever, who gives a shit. But all of the mechanics do not fit at all for any kind of modern game. D20 Modern is the reason Option Tactics exists, because I hated that game. And I tried to run something with it, and I could not run what I wanted to with it, because it did not work as it was intended. To give a quick rundown, in D20 Modern, armor does, for looking at a modern game, armor doesn't make sense. The weapons don't make sense. How you spend money, and I'm going to have to touch that one back, because that one's a really egregious problem. Doesn't make sense. It has classes for a modern game, and I say that in saying because Option Tactics for the longest fucking time had classes. But the way it did them like D&D classes. They were too different. So you had clear winners and clear losers. Basically, Dex was king. What else? I did money, armor. It had the same 3.5, 3.0 skill set spread, so you had 26, 30 skills that could very climb, and what is a fucking all strengths climb and I can't think of all the strength scores.
You mean the acrobatics checks and all that kind of stuff?
Well, instead of acrobatics, it had jump and dodge and it chopped them up. But it chopped each one up. Modern. It also had 3 weird skills: research, investigate, research, investigate, and profession. Now, I'm going to pause here for this one because profession requires me to talk about the money. So the way you buy things in D20 Modern is not how in any other RPG I've ever seen in my entire life. And what you do is you have what's called a wealth score. You take a D20, you roll, you have a wealth score based on your occupation, and it goes up or down depending on how you spend money or blah, 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 blah. And every item in D20 Modern has a DC, right?
Okay.
If you want to buy something, let's say I want to buy a double barrel shotgun, right? 12 gauge, 2 barrels, 18-inch barrels, whatever, right? This has a DC score of 10. Now, they didn't actually, the only reference of how much something actually costs I was able to find in a, what is that thing called? A chart, a Game Master sheet chart. That's the only reference I've ever seen, because they don't mention any of this shit in the book. They just say it's a DC 10. You then take your D20, you roll a D20 to see if you can buy that thing.
Oh, wow.
You have your score, and it goes up or down depending on if the thing is expensive. Now,
if you failed, can you never roll it again, or how does that work?
That was the other weird, ambiguous thing they didn't say. It didn't say you couldn't. It just said that you can't. You don't. It says you can't get the funds right now. Some bullshit like that. I don't know how they expect people to run this game, but profession. The reason I brought that up is because profession. For every 3 ranks in profession you have, you get a +1 to your wealth score every level. Okay?
Okay.
So, profession becomes the number 1 skill on that list because it affects your money. Because we're talking like you get a +1 per level.
Wow.
Yeah, it was, you didn't buy things very often in 20 Modern, which was dumb to me because it's like, you're a modern game. Equipment was stupid as well, particularly weapons. There was just not enough choice. And when they added a book called The Weapons Locker, the Weapons Locker was a testament to one strong motherfucker's ability to copy and paste. Because the only thing that they did in that book was they had some decent line art pictures of guns, a little blurb, and then a stat block. The stat block was pretty much the same gun. The only difference was the magazine and the weight.
Didn't you say it was something like just the crossbow, just with different? It
was 2D, like for most handguns, 2D6 or 2D4.
Yeah.
That's the light crossbow, dude. So it was bad. It was really, really bad. Melee weapons were clearly a superior choice, which was really funny because the second best armor in the game, and I say that phrase being it gave you the most bonuses, was plate mail armor, because it used the standard defense AC whatever of D&D.
Yeah.
There is no DR. Either you hit or you don't. That's all armor does. It gives you AC. This is a modern game, mind you. This is a game written in 2001 about the modern world as the time we know of it. There were there were like 2 upgrades for guns, for all guns. I think it's like flashlight or suppressor, and that's, well, quite frankly, garbage. Let's see, armor, skills. So magic. Hold on.
Go ahead.
I'm still rolling through it. Magic was basically a copy of 3.5. It was bad because and the things they did add, like the edge thing that you see on Shadowrun, basically unbalanced the game because you have this one thing you can roll and it gives some bonus to your D20 roll, but there's no way to recover it. So once you use it, you're done for life with it. And to top it all off, health spiraled out of control. Even if you rolled health, by level 6 out of 20, you could probably tank gunshots, and just not give a fuck.
That's what I would expect, honestly, from a D20 Modern, because D&D itself is obviously balanced on the side of taking a lot of hits, but...
Yeah, but D&D is fantasy.
Exactly. And in Modern, it sounds like if you wanted to actually optimize in this game, you'd have to you'd have to walk around in, New York City with a full plate mail and be the most professional person in the world.
Also be very fast, because Dex is king in that game. And specifically, the fast hero is king in that game. Because Dex controls guns, and you might as well just not play anything else. Yeah. D20 Modern, terrible game. D20 Modern is an example of a fantasy heartbreaker, actually. That's probably what I'll use.
Yeah.
Okay?
Except created by Wizards, right?
Mm-hmm. I think Monty Cook worked on that. No joke. I think he really did.
And then they forgot that they made it.
Yeah, then they forgot that they just quietly pushed it under. Well, the thing is that I have scoured the web and everything like that. I have every copy of every D20 Modern book on PDF. I also have every copy of every third-party D20 Modern on PDF. I have everything related to D20 Modern. It's all archived on my hard drive. I keep that because I was using it as an example and just things to read. Because D20 Modern, I will give them credit. They did do a few good things that I stole.
Like what?
Like occupations. So even though you had your class, you also had your occupation, which gave you a bonus to different skills and gave you bonus feats and gave you money and stuff like that. That's a good idea for a modern game.
Okay,
The part where they fucked up is they didn't allow you to ever change that occupation, and there were no mechanics to move from occupation to occupation. So if you're a cop, you're a cop. I don't think they expect people to play long campaigns with you.
Yeah. Well, I almost don't want to know, but do they have a monster manual? Do they have anything that's like...
Oh, yeah. There's a monster manual. Most of the stuff in the monster manual is copied from the monster manual 1 and 2. There are some few interesting ones, like the Crawfordsville monster. There's some modern stuff in there. But for the most part, it's just copy-pasted over.
Oh, okay.
Magic is also copy pasted over with a few modern update caveats. Like apparently the Bard got replaced with a Walkman, so a boombox.
Oh.
so you can buy CDs that play music and do things like the Bard would.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty fucked up.
How modern.
I know. There are also different expansion packs, which, except for Apocalypse, they were all pretty terrible. D20 Future was particularly egregious because it was, for lack of a better phrase, they didn't finish it. It wasn't done. There's clear things where it's just like, yeah, this game isn't done. Where's the rest of it?
You mean like mechanics that just don't connect with anything else, or it's not?
Yeah, actually, yeah. Like mechanics didn't connect with anything else. Open-ended statements, like especially the spaceships. The spaceships are really open-ended. It felt more like an idea book than an actual like, this is how you run this and this. And the technology didn't make any sense when you look at it objectively. Like shit that should be in this TL, it was in this one. And shit that was like I think the warp drive beat the warp gate for some reason. So warp gates were made after the warp drive. Sorry, no, they were made before the warp drive.
Oh, right, yeah. So they can teleport, but they can't go fast yet.
Yeah, it's yeah.
And by TL, just so people know, you mean technology level, right?
Technology level, yes, that's correct.
That sounds pretty horrible. See, to me, that just it says so much about Wizards of the Coast, period, that I'm like, why do people still give so much credit to D&D if... Because
it's a mediocre game that's good enough for a lot of people. You gotta remember, dude, everybody ain't autistic.
But I guess some people can separate, the different teams. This guy worked on that game and he's not part of this, so then don't... But to me, it's like that company just doesn't have standards if that's the kind of shit they're putting out.
They're a company. They're about here to make money.
Yeah, but they're
Look at them like Apple, dude. Seriously, look at them like Apple. They're about making money. They're not about, starting a movement or whatever.
But Apple does, a certain quality level, and that's why they have their success.
Oh, sweet Lord,
among
if you
other
only
things.
knew. It's not a tech. If you want to know how good Apple is, look up Linus Tech Tips, or I forget what his name is, but he's some dude out of New York that fixes their shit. Yeah, Apples are fucked. And I'm going to piss off people like that, but I don't give a shit.
Oh, right. You're an IT guy. I always forget that.
Yes, I work in the industry. Apple, do not buy an Apple unless absolutely necessary.
I don't know any Apple stuff, but that's just what everybody tells me is that it's the greatest, quality. So
no, it's terrible quality actually, but it's terrible quality that you as a consumer won't understand. And that's to go back to Wizards of the Coast and your confusion. The average consumer will not understand. The average person who plays D&D does not understand why they play, why their fun is wrong, quote unquote.
Right.
Because they're having fun, which is fine.
Yeah.
Me personally, that's fine. You're having fun, that's cool. But the systems I'm mentioning should be avoided specifically because they are counter to fun.
Right. Okay. So arguments aside about
because D20 Modern is frustrating. Because that's the first system I actually picked up and tried to run, and I was frustrated.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So they, D&D has its own thing, and then the base thing does it. It's comfortable to play that game, but this wasn't even comfortable to play. It was just frustrating.
Yes, because everything that you would expect is wrong. Oh yeah, and I didn't get into the feats. Everything is. I'm gonna sum it up. Everything is garbage about that game. That's what it boils down to.
All right.
The third game I'm going to talk about is GURPS. Now I'm fucking with you. I like GURPS. That was just to piss off some people. It's cool. GURPS is fine. No, the third game I'm actually going to talk about is a game called Fatal.
I've definitely heard people talk about that. I haven't looked into it.
Okay, so you don't know anything about Fatal.
Not really.
I'm going to sum this up in one sentence. Roll for anal circumference.
This sounds like the first game.
No. So Fatal is a game that it has a very storied history. Most people who are listening to this will have heard of Fatal. So I'm going to basically explain this to you as quickly as I can. Fatal is a game that tried to pride itself on being adult and mature and everything, but it did that maturity in the most childish way possible. it also requires you to roll a character. Everything about your character has to be rolled. So you can die in character gen.
Okay, I have heard that.
The other problem is that there are so many things about, like, there's like 40 different meters of character. Like, and it's such weird stuff. Like, it's like walking charisma. Walking, like you can walk ugly.
Oh.
In the game, yeah, but the other thing that you roll, I was talking about roll for anal circumference, that you roll all of your, like, body parts. So breast size, anal circumference, vagina depth, all that shit is rolled.
What? You're kidding, right?
I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding even a little. I will pass you the PDF. I have the PDFs. Do you want them?
I know, I don't. Well, actually, I kind of do, because I can't help but look at these systems and see what... Okay, does anybody play this game, first of all? I have to
No. TG at one point attempted to try to, but because the book is literally unfinished, because it's missing... You can't generate a character fully because there are parts missing in the book. Sorry, there was supposed to be a second book about gods and such that you need to finish your rolling a character, but you cannot. There's also nothing laid out for, like, actually generating a world and stuff like that. The setting book doesn't exist, for lack of a better phrase.
Okay, so
it's not.
It's a bad system, but
no.
It's not like there's people out there who are playing this and.
No. Well, the reason I brought up Fatal is because Fatal is a primary example of too complex to be played. So Fatal, Fatal 2000. Let's see what grab. Is that the old one? That's the new one. They're all the new one. Okay, cool. Yeah, they're all the new one. I don't have the original something into adult lechery. I just have From Time of the Land. Okay, give me a second. So Fatal has the dice size. I think it goes up to 1 million or something like that. 1D 1 million. I'm trying to see if I can. Yeah, this book is also 900 pages long.
Holy shit.
Yeah, this is an example. These are two examples. Dice are fucked because there's, like, nobody wants to roll a 1D 1000. That's, let alone a 1D 10,000. It's just not, like, who cares, right?
So basically they made this game without actually any real audience in mind of who was
This was made in a vacuum.
Yeah.
That's what it boils down to.
Was it made by one crazy person at least, or was there
I think it was made by a few people. Let me actually see. Yeah, the largest game book ever printed. Like, that's not...
It's not a selling point.
Fatal Games. I don't see any. Brian Hall. There's one name, so it must have been one person.
All right. If I can get Brian Hall on the show, I want to ask if...
Good fucking luck, dude. Apparently it has an ISBN. That kind of pisses me off, actually. All right, then. Yeah, it was made by one person, Brian Hall. And you don't judge an RPG's doneness and what is the phrase? You don't judge an RPG's, like, completion by how long it is. It's like judging, an airplane by how much it weighs.
Yeah.
It's not, that's counter to your point, because most people see 900 pages and they go, no.
Right.
Because I know this with Ops. When Ops was 300 something pages, people were like, nah, that's too much. And that's a third of that.
Yeah. And even if there would be somebody who would say, that sounds great. This sounds like the best system ever. You need to justify that amount of pages with something that would be fucking amazing. Like, if you combine all the splat books of GURPS into the core GURPS, rule book or something.
Please don't do that. That is a terrible idea, but I get what you're saying.
There's meat on the bone is what I'm saying.
Yeah. This is basically just the psychotic ramblings of a crazy person. And to be exact, it is exactly 977 pages long.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So don't play your game in a vacuum. That's number one. Number two is don't play test your shit. because this just came out. There was no like query or some shit like that. It just willed itself into existence. Okay?
Man,
play test your shit and be very careful about using dice. Because most people do not want to go beyond. If you can't represent it using at the most the 7 series dice set, D4, D4, D6, D8, D10, D12, and D20s. Is it 6 or 7?
I don't know. However many. Yeah, I know what you're saying. The standard dice that people use nowadays.
If you can't do that normally without either having some special dice or, dividing the die number, you never want, multiplying works too, but you don't want to roll the D1000, roll the D100 6 times. Like, nobody wants to do that.
Man.
Yeah.
I actually have to start giving people on GDG more credit now because I haven't seen anything close to that bad yet. And I was thinking some of these guys, they're probably at the low end, but this is why you wanted to explain to me what these actual bad games are like. Yeah.
I'm going to breeze by Black Tokyo. Black Tokyo is basically, if memory serves, it's been a minute since I've actually looked at it. Imagine fucking like a rape. Imagine if a rape fetishist made a game. That's Black Tokyo.
Oh.
It's not bad, but it's not good.
Wait, it's
because
not bad?
There's so much. Oh, well, it's not bad in the sense of it's not mechanically that it's. From the stuff I'm describing, it's everything I've listed thus far. It works. However, the don't put sex in your games. That's what it basically boils down to.
Yeah.
Please don't put sex in your games because putting sex in your games may turn people off.
Yeah, we can make that a rule.
Yeah.
We're gonna create a list of rules by the end of this podcast. We're gonna have what not to do.
Yeah, it's to and it's also on D4 tab. Also, as a note, Black Tokyo used East Point in Modern.
Oh.
As a base.
What are the odds of that?
Pro tip. Yeah. So yeah, it's bad. It's really bad. But I'm breezing by that. There's nothing.
I'll gladly breeze by that one.
Yeah, we're going to breeze by that one. Then there's one that's relatively new. I actually didn't know anything about it, but somebody who reviews bad RPGs for not a living, but a hobby, turned me on to this and let me read his review, and I read through the whole goddamn thing. It's a game called He Sent Dragons.
Okay. Never heard of that one, obviously.
And it's not spelled He Sent Dragon. It's like Heave Civ Dragons or some shit like that. Let me see if I can find it.
The hell?
My internet's lagging. Yeah, it's Black Tokyo. Yeah, I can't find it. Let's try Heave. Yeah, Heave Sent Dragons. You can find it if I don't know how to spell it, but essentially it's a furry RPG. And I don't mean like it's a furry RPG in the sense of like Mouse Guard or whatever. Or it's an actual furry RPG. It's the lore. How do I say this? You ever see a story that wanted a solution and would just do anything to make that solution a reality?
Sure. I think that's usually called like Deus Ex Machina or something like that. It's like,
yeah, that game is full of Deus Ex Machina, story-wise. It's like people colonize Earth and then they something about turning people into furries is bad, but raising them from, cybernetic wombs is fine. So we'll do that instead. It's a bunch of bullshit, but the short of it is that, it's bad because it has a very bad storyline that does not make sense. People have to realize when you're writing an RPG, you don't have to use Earth. You don't have to use our modern conventions. That's the reason I'm bringing this up. If you want a furry game, that's cool. You do you. I'm not going to play it, but somebody plays.
Yeah, somebody's going to play it, but you still want to have
if you're going to have a storyline that you have to bend bullshit to get it to work, don't use Earth. Make up a planet. People do it all the time.
I don't think you give yourself any advantages by picking Earth because
it's easy. It's because you can say like Earth but blank.
Right.
That's why people do it, because you can say like you don't. And I say this because I'm going through this right now. I'm writing Grand Adventures in Space, the Kandai RP, the setting. We had to start from scratch. We had to actually go and think about like culture. Like, okay, they have this culture and it works for them, but it's like alien to us. Like we had to go like, okay, what does a planet have on it that's habitable? It's usually between this range and this range of temperature. It has an atmosphere. It had the hydrosphere. Like we had to go and build that shit from scratch, and we had to explain it in universe. We had to also say this ain't our physics. These physics, like because of magic mostly, but like there are some things in this universe that we don't have in ours. That's fine. That's cool. That works. Don't just co-opt Earth and then bend shit around that doesn't make any fucking sense. But still, in the same sense, try and say, "Oh yeah, it's Earth and we have Earth morality and blah blah blah, whatever." Fuck it. Don't do that. That's bad. Please stop that.
I would also say that probably if you're playing a tabletop RPG, you really don't want to be thinking about Earth that much. You want to be thinking about something that's different.
Yeah, but I'm speaking on the failings of the writer. If player's gonna play, so whatever. But as a writer, if you're going to either explain it correctly or don't explain it at all, just be like, they're furry. Like if the person who wrote He Sent Dragoons had been like, oh, and the other one is that there's a lot of heavy political shit in their book, which is something I would also say not to do. It's something about capitalism is the best thing, and it's utterly retarded, and not because capitalism is retarded. I like capitalism, but it's retarded in the sense of it's like corporation, like it's counter to everything that exists in our world, but it's in our world.
Is it like anarcho-capitalism or something like that? Or?
Yes, that's what it's called. Yeah, it's anarcho-capitalism. Wow. But it's anarcho-capitalism with a benevolent anarcho-capitalism. So companies care about their employees, blah 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 blah, whatever. But my point to state this was that please don't put political shit in your game. Nobody cares about your political opinion, and just as many people as you're going to you're also going to alienate a bunch of people. So political shit does not really belong in most RPGs. And when I say political shit, I don't mean like the policies of the universe. I mean like,
yeah, that's what I was going to say.
And then in 2008, the Earthlings elected Trump, and that was the dumbest. Like, don't do that shit. Nobody cares. Well, take that back. People care a lot, but nothing good can come of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
no, that sounds like a pretty bad train wreck from the title to the premise to everything.
The system itself, it can be broken. The guy, I think is Purple, who actually reviewed it. It can be broken. He broke it, and he snapped it over his knee like he wasn't even trying. So yeah, that's one. You got any for us, or should I keep going?
You should keep going because each one is disappointing me in a different way, and
Okay, next one's called Rahowa, or Racial Holy War. Okay?
Racial Holy War?
Racial Holy War. Rahowa. It's exactly what it's basically racial superiority, it's a white supremacist game, RPG. The problem is that it's not good. Like, and I mean, by now your viewers should know that I'm black, so there's that, but honestly, I don't really care. But it's like, it's not funny. It's not satirical. It's not.
Well, it's like, called
hateful enough. I guess that makes sense. It's just like this milquetoast, pissant swing at other races. So.
It sounds, honestly, it sounds like a 4chan joke. I mean, it doesn't sound like a real thing.
It's not a 4chan joke. It's not a 4chan joke at all. Would you like the PDF?
Yeah, sure. I want it.
Okay.
I want all this stuff.
There you go. There's the PDF. There's Racial Holy War. The issue with Racial Holy War are multiple. First off, there's a lot of things that it doesn't actually explain. It really feels like a big just jerk off project, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
by Reverend Kenneth Molyneux.
That is correct.
Okay, that's an interesting twist.
Yeah, it's not like it's bad. Like if it were good, I could be kind of upset. But this is just like, if you're gonna be racist, at least make a good game, okay? That's my response to that. Like don't be racist and terrible.
I'm skimming through it. I should probably not, because I'm gonna get distracted. I can't do the podcast and read this.
It's bad. It's bad. It's like if somebody was trying to be as offensive as possible. It's like if it was a 4chan. The thing is that it's not a 4chan joke. It's a legitimate RPG.
Apparently somebody thought it was good enough to put their real name on it and advertise it and everything. So, I mean, I guess they really estimated that. I don't know. Maybe there's a market for it.
Maybe, I guess. I mean, that's a really odd market for.
I gotta say, the name
white
racial holy
war. Like white supremacist, but also a nerd. Like that's a really specific crowd.
Yeah. I gotta say, I think that the name is like, makes me think we're talking about, Warhammer 40K or something like that.
Paladins and shit, yeah. But no, it's
the God Emperor, and the Xenos or something, like different races like that. I thought it was going to be like orcs and shit.
Yeah.
Wow. Well.
See, okay, I'll give you. Okay, I'm gonna read it. I'm gonna read an excerpt from this game. This is just enjoy, listeners. The War Master and Adventurer. The War Master controls the environment, enemies, and non-player characters in the racial holy war. He also controls and perhaps makes up the story and how things go in an adventure. As such, he is very important and has a lot of power. He must take into consideration the level, experience, and power of the White Warriors when deciding what. By the way, characters are called White Warriors.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay, you don't have a choice in that matter.
Nope, you're white. Deal with it. Let's see. Where was I? He must take into blah blah blah. A good war master is therefore usually intelligent with good creative imagination, and also I'm going to add, this isn't actually in the book, but probably white. Let's see. Yeah, the world of racial holy war is the dominant and the domain of adventures for the White Warriors. As noted above, unless there is an adventure already made up, a war master must make up an adventure to send the White Warriors on. I'm stopping here because I'm just like, this is the entire how to GM space in this book. A good war master, blah, 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 blah. Oh, at a minimum, 2 players can play, 1 White Warrior and 1 War Master, but there's no limit to the amount of players who can play. I'm stopping here again because that's a bad thing to say to somebody trying to run an RPG. That there's an unlimited amount of people that can play this game at one time? No, that's terrible. That's a terrible idea. That's terrible. Because a GM would very quick, like, if you had 30 people trying to play this game, it would involve into chaos.
Well, of course, and it shows that it's not written to be played. It's not even written that whoever did it wasn't experienced and play tested it and was like, yeah, this works with 12 people.
Yeah, this was basically shit out as a statement, I guess.
Yeah, I would say that's pretty obvious that it's got to be a statement, an advertisement for his church if he's a reverend or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it's
pretty magical.
It's pretty terrible. So, the reason I brought that one up is because, racism. Specifically, this one goes back to the last political thing I said about don't bring politics into your RPGs when you write them. This one has an egregious thing like that. If you don't like black people, that's cool. That's 100% okay. If you try and shine that out in an RPG, it will most likely be it will most likely destroy your RPG's quality because you're trying to pigeonhole in shit like that, and this isn't really the medium for it. Like, write a regular book, make some jerk off fan fiction. I guess it wouldn't be fan fiction. write some jerk off fiction or whatever about some dude, who just killed a bunch of African kids, whatever. Like, but don't make an RPG because it's going to be terrible. And a second thing, don't just, because this was done. This had to have been done in Word, specifically Word and not OpenOffice, because I know OpenOffice does not turn out PDFs like that. So he had to have used Word for this.
That's a very basic document.
Do not use Word for RPGs. Period. It's not made for it. OpenOffice is better, and I hate OpenOffice. So
I gotta ask you though, what do you think? You were talking about not putting in political shit, not being racist or whatever. What do you think about the other side of things where, like, D&D changing things now with elves being able to change their gender once per day and stuff like that?
Yeah,
because that's happening. I mean, that's where things are going right now. It seems
I know, and
I mean, to me, that's not political, but it's so
it's
obviously...
political. No, it's definitely political. It's 100% political. I mean, first of all, I'm just going to give the standard response, the standard, TG traditional games response that elves have always been able to change the gender. We just didn't know it. Like fucking. But real talk. When I say don't bring political shit into the game, I mean don't use the game as political commentary on contemporary political issues in such a blatant manner. So if you're gonna be subtle about it, fucking be subtle about it. Make it interesting. Don't be boring with politics.
Well, you see, and that's why I don't like the gender changing thing. That's why I don't really like. First of all,
I don't really care either way when it comes in, because Wizards, again, they're a company. They're about appeasing as much people as possible, as quickly as possible.
But it's going in with the whole, like, there's basically a cultural movement happening there where they're trying to tap into and appeal to, and they're pandering is what it is.
Because they're a company. You want a company who panders that's called marketing. That's exactly what that is. I said it before and I'll say it again. Wizards of the Coast is a company. They're out there to make that dollar. So,
but that you cannot. I'm guessing you're saying that as a derogatory thing more than because you still have personal.
I'm saying it as a matter of factly. It's not derogatory or positive. It is what it is. They're a company. I expect them to act like a company. If Apple found out that chopping your dick off was the new it thing, right? The Apple iPhone would have a feature that chopped your dick off. It would, like, seriously, because the reason it would have it is because that's what they see the market want. They want devices that chop your dick off. So because the market,
I really don't agree with that. I mean, on a capitalist, free market level, that's obviously true.
Somebody will make a phone that will chop your dick off. It may not be Apple, but I can guarantee you somebody.
Yeah, somebody will, but that's exactly it, is that you're a company. If you have a company, you can decide which side of any spectrum you want to be on, which side of any issue you want to be on. And
they have picked their side.
Yeah, exactly. You pander to different things. And guess what? You can pander to the people who don't want fucking politics in their games. You can pander to that majority of people that just don't want to think about social justice warriors or Antifa or
I'm not saying
the alt-right or whoever it is.
I'm not saying you can't. I mean, look at Option Tactics. It's politically neutral as I can be, but it's very pro-gun because, again, it's Option Tactics. However, that's up to you. If you want, like I said, if you want to make a good game, generally you stay away from politics because trying to inject politics will overwrite the quality of the game.
Right, and that's why Option Tactics has so much real meat of interesting, mechanics and things to do, and I almost always feel just it just sticks out like a sore thumb when somebody's compensating for their lack of real creativity by pandering to somebody and being like, well,
Well, I mean, but it's
basically
not even,
we don't have an idea for what to do next, so we're just.
It's not even. But and here's the thing: you're looking at it from a conscious, you're looking at it from an artist design point. Don't do that at all, because that's not Wizards of the Coast. They're not artists; they're businessmen. That's what I keep saying about it's all about money. They're a company. They're out here to make money. They're not out here to show how well they can make an RPG.
There's no vision at all. Here. It's just chasing
Fuck
whatever.
No. The vision died when TSR sold D&D. That's when actually, honestly, no, it died when that bitch of a wife, that Gary Gygax had took his company away from him. That's when the vision fucking died. Hate me if you want to, but that's a statement I'm saying. The vision is dead. The vision has been dead since 3.0.
I can respect that as an interesting thing. I mean, fourth edition was pretty interesting.
Fourth edition was an overcorrection. That's what fourth edition was.
But that doesn't come without any vision, right? That's something that was.
It was an overcorrection. It was a correction to. It's just like if somebody has a phone or let's say I'm gonna use a pen because I have a pen in my hand. If somebody says, okay, every 100 clicks of this pen, it squirts ink at me, right? As a business, I'm going to come up with Pen 2.0, and I'm going to remove that feature because my market does not like that feature. Now, if the market was like every 100 clicks, I can only squirt ink, and I want to squirt ink every click, then bam, what I would do as a business maker, to provide the product that fits, would to make a pen that squirts every time you press the button. It's not about with it, like D&D is not about.
It's just responding to signals and trends
in the industry. That's why you look at 3.5 and you look at all the major complaints of 3.5. 4E, for lack of a better phrase, fixed every damn one of them. And you know what happened? People complain. Because just because people complain about something doesn't mean they don't like it. Just because people complain about something doesn't mean they want it to go away. The thing that Wizards of the Coast didn't realize is they didn't understand the market they were in.
Yeah, and then 5th edition seems to have actually gotten to this sort of sweet spot where they re-invited all the problems back in and just let people complain about it, and they're just going to roll with it.
Well, they fixed some of the more egregious problems, but the problems that originally existed, originally in 3.5 were either corrected or changed, or like one of the major issues was that combat takes fucking long, and it does because there's all these different fucking checks and stuff like that. So they streamlined that. Another issue that I remember people were talking about is that the way spells are written, especially between all the books, that they don't make any fucking sense. Like one spell says a mile in like range, another is like 25 feet, and the problem with that is that a mile is not easily divisible by 5 in feet.
Yeah.
Rather. So you'd have it so where you'd have things that are range wise, it doesn't make any fucking sense. They fixed that.
Yeah. I mean, they did fix things, but I'm just saying that
Caster Supremacy was another one in 5e. I mean in 3.5. Caster Supremacy. They fixed it in 4 and nobody hated it because everybody felt like they didn't fix it by making the fighter and everybody else better than the mage, which kind of invalidated any reason to play the mage.
Well, I get what you're saying though. They did fix things, but they're still basically just getting to.
They're a company.
They're trying to find the sweet spot of who the most people that will buy their product, and that's what they're going to appeal to.
Yes, that is exactly what I'm saying. That's why I say I don't care one way or another about elves being able to change their gender or not, because that's what's hot right now, for lack of a better phrase.
And then to the people who are shopping for an RPG, all you would basically have to say then is be wary of a company that's acting like that, because they're not actually trying to make the game better and appeal. Like they're not going to.
Yeah, but I don't think people give it. I don't think people who shop for RPGs are at the level to give a fuck.
Well,
to be blunt, they want to have. These people want to have fun. They want to play. They're not like us. They're not math nerds. They don't stress over dice mechanics and things like that. They want to have fun. That is something I realized writing Option Tactics. To put it bluntly, nobody cares.
Yeah.
You know what I mean when I say that?
Yeah, I mean, there's just
Okay.
they don't have that highest standard.
Right. It's not just me and you talking. I will explain it for our viewers. Nobody cares about your vision. Nobody cares about your ideas. Nobody cares about, how clever you think you are or blah, 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 blah. They want a fun game. They come here to play a fun game, not to be preached at, not to be, probably to be jerked off a little bit depending on the game, but they don't want to be preached at. They don't want to be hit over the head with a math, generally people don't want to be hit over the head with a math test or things like that. They want to come and they want to play a fun game. That's why Option Tactics is not super simulation, because I had to cut a lot of shit in the gun world out of Option Tactics to make it playable. And I've seen other games do the same thing. GURPS does the same thing. GURPS does the same thing. I know Shadowrun does the same thing. Like, it's about, a lot of people forget that this is about fun, not correct.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't even, to me, I'm not coming at it from the perspective of being objectively better. I don't care about even the idea of being
There
objective.
are people in this community, specifically the game design community, who are, and that's a problem.
Yeah, to me that's a very strange thing, because I want to have, what I really want is to have strong competition between, a good selection of people doing totally different things and having a vision so that you can be like, well, I don't want to play that, or, you can like more than one game. You can say, well, I have fun with D&D, but when I really want to, get into some, modern tactical shit, I'm going to play Ops and Tactics. When I want to do, something that's totally narrative based and just very rules light and sort of elegant or whatever, I'll play Misfortune, which is like a game somebody else is making here on GDG, and it's like you can have,
or Fate or something like that. Yeah, and what I'm telling you is that most people anybody who would be quote unquote turned off by the fact that elves can change their gender isn't in this community. They're not the people who Wizards of the Coast is targeting. They're not old heads. Well, that makes sense. I remember when people were when elf became a race and not a class. That was a world ending for a lot of fucking people. Elves aren't a class, they're not a race, they're a class, blah, 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 blah. Like, that was a seriously big thing for a lot of people. Sure. When they turned elf from a class to a race, it was a huge problem for a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know.
I see the same thing as this, but on a smaller scale. All they did is give elves a racial ability that's 99% fluff.
Yeah, exactly. But, on the other hand, what I would say is that even though you have the old players who remember the way things were and they don't want things to change, that's one way of looking at it. But
yes, and the wonderful thing is they don't have to. They can play their old system. This ain't like Games Workshop, where once the new one comes out, that's it.
There is that, but I think there's going to be, if there isn't already, with the whole rising tide of 5e and the increasing, let's say the whole like slice of pie thing, the pie is getting bigger, more people are coming into the hobby, there's going to be...
That's a good thing.
It's great. And then when they make choices like this and they start pandering in this way, there is going to be a percent of that pie slice that's going to start looking for other games, or at least like being open to trying a different game, because even young people, there's a big division between people who are sick of political stuff being put in their games.
Okay.
And, people who, I don't think it's a division between young and old. I think it's just a division between, people who want to have something that's interesting and
Wizards of the Coast, and Wizards of the Coast saw the writing on the wall and decided to go in the direction that they felt would make them the most money. I can't hate them for that, because that's what they do. They make games to make money, plain and simple. They make games to sell books. They make games to sell miniatures. They make games to sell monster manuals and GM guides and novels and shit like that. That's what their goal is. My goal is not to do that. I'm not out here trying to make, money off Option Tactics. I know a lot of people out there aren't out there to make money off of their RPG or whatever, right? So because we forsake the money aspect, we have a little bit more freedom.
But I don't know. I have to say, like, I understand what you're saying. I just think even that, they have to be careful that they're playing with fire. It could actually backfire. They could end up losing customers and having...
I mean, they probably will lose customers, but they'll probably gain them too. So it is what it is. Like, I don't see it as them. How do I say this? I don't think they give a fuck about gender politics one way or the other.
No, I don't think they do either. I think they are just pandering.
Well, not even that, but I think that because you say pandering, you say pandering like they're an individual. They're a company. They're marketing. There's a big difference. They're marketing to a target audience. That's all they're doing.
Right. Yeah.
It's not pandering if you're trying to sell somebody. It's marketing.
Yeah, I guess
never forget that. Because it's not like we're on your side. It's like, hey, pay us money.
Yeah.
And
if you buy that, then guess what? We got 5 more lined up that we're going to sell you after that because...
Then get them hooked and keep them rolling. So that's why I'm like, I don't care because they're business.
Do you have... let's try to get back on the tracks here a little bit. Is there more bad games, or should we get into all the... We got a huge list of stuff we want to talk about. We're an hour in now.
I've hit the major ones. I've hit the major ones I had on my list. So we can probably go from there. Because
there's so much stuff I wanted to talk to you about. I think the bad RPGs are something that, you can... I'm looking at the PDF files that you sent, and it's like, it really is worse. And I can say now that D&D is not nearly as bad as
not even
you
close.
mentioned. I don't even know how much learning value there is from looking at them and saying, don't do this, because it's just so obvious. I don't think even the worst amateur
obvious is relative.
There. What's that?
What's obvious to somebody who's done this for a while, maybe a eureka moment for somebody who's just getting into this.
That's true.
So
that's true. But I want to talk about your opinions on some of the other more design philosophy sort of stuff. Specifically, one of the things I wanted to talk about was something you made very clear, which is that you designed your game that you don't trust the GM.
Yes.
And you had that ties in with a lot of different things, but part of it is I'm thinking the top-down versus bottom-up thing, and a lot more, and it's also in the priorities of what you work on first, because the way that sounds like you wrote it, you said that you sort of thought of it like a video game, in the sense that, it has to be clear what you're able to do or not. But in the GDG community, from what I've seen, is sort of an acceptance that you have to trust the GM.
Nope, you don't have to trust the GM. You don't have to trust the GM at all. Well, you do. Okay, I take that back. You do to a point. I've finished all of my tea, so I'm probably gonna take like a 30-second break after I say this sentence.
Sure.
But yeah, so you do have to trust the GM, but you only have to trust the GM. You don't have to trust the GM on things that are like mechanical. You do obviously have to trust the GM to run a competent story and stuff like that, but the system should never be the reason why the GM failed, because GMs, for lack of a better phrase, aren't very good at them. It's just in my personal experience, take your feelings, well, take your fees where you want to. Just something I've noticed. GMs generally and here's why. They don't have the time to sit and evaluate the impact a rule may have on a long-term basis.
Yeah, I think that's a great point.
They have to make a snap decision right then and there. And usually that snap decision is not the best decision. Sometimes it is, but the other thing they have to be consistent with it. So they have to, yes. Like if I say yes, you can parry a ray spell. I say that because that actually happened one time in a game I played in a long time ago. If I then go back and I don't remember that, but trust me, your players will remember that because it's beneficial to them.
Yeah.
And they go, you let me parry the ray spell this time, but not this time because this is an important boss fight. Blah 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 blah. So it really can reduce the what's the phrase? Confidence in the GM.
Yeah. Yeah, if you make these sort of one-off judgment calls, that's something that I'm currently trying to figure out how to phrase it and how to, because to some extent as a designer, you have to train the GM to think along the terms of your system, but the best way to do that is to have like a rule they can look up. But there's also, there's guys out there.
Yeah.
There's guys out there who's like, I'm thinking of one guy in specific. He's going to know who he is. Use common sense. That's his banner of his project.
Nope. And I can tell you, and I say it like this: common sense is one of the most varying means of metering something in the world. Okay,
I have to agree.
So, use common sense is. For example, it's perfectly common sense for me. It's perfectly common sense for me to have, to walk into a hardware store and buy a brick of ammunition. That's common sense because that you can do that. It may not be common sense for somebody who lives in Britain.
Yeah.
That may be strange and foreign to
terrifying.
Them. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
That's why I don't like the common sense monkeyer.
I don't really
like that at all.
The reason why I don't like it is because the people who are looking up your rules, the people who don't have common sense are the ones who need the rule the most. Like, if you have common sense, you don't need to be told to use common sense. The only people who need to be told use common sense are the people who, for whatever reason they don't get it. You need to explain it to them.
Yeah. The other reason I don't trust GMs is because rule lawyers exist. And rule bullies exist too. You know what a rule bully is?
Not really.
A rule bully is a rules lawyer who uses the rules to bully the GM into doing things that they probably shouldn't be doing.
So what would be a good example of that?
I'm going to reach back to D&D. But the whole, I'm going to close my eyes as a paladin. Okay, so it's like, hey, you have to see acts, right?
Yeah.
See bad acts. Now, as a player, I want this bad act to happen. I'm playing a paladin. So I'm just going to close my eyes. I didn't see it, and the GM was like, well, no, you have to, it says that you have, if you see it, it's trying to imply that if you know about it, but the book says see, and I could be wrong, so I'm just using an example. But the book says see, I'm following the rules to the book.
Yeah.
You can't, it is what it is. You can, and this is where Rule 0 will be invoked sometimes, but not every GM knows how to invoke that. So yeah, using the rules to bully your way to do things you want to do. A great example is Pun Pun. Pun is probably the greatest example of. Sorry, I wouldn't say not Pun Pun. Pun Pun's a great example of min-maxing and broken systems. But if a GM says you can use any book and you make Pun Pun, you are a rules book. Because
what's the difference between that and a rules lawyer, though?
A rules lawyer is somebody who simply points out the rules as written and say, hey, the rules say this. And this is what the rule, this is how we should follow the rules.
Oh,
that
right.
Doesn't necessarily mean that it's in their benefit.
A rules bully that would be more like he's actually aggressive about trying to use the rules for weird shit or to actually change the flow of the game and stuff and defy common sense.
Yeah, a rules lawyer, to be an example, is like if a GM says, well, roll your will save to block that, and the rules lawyer would be like, but the book says roll, what's it called? The book says roll...
Your Constitution or something.
Well, like your roll fortitude or something like that. That's a rules lawyer. A rules bully would use the book to make it so where he only rolls fortitude because that's his best stat.
Yeah. So what your design philosophy is that those people exist and you have to consider them while you're writing your stuff.
You're right. You should write books for them, specifically for them.
See, now there's a different guy, Magic Juggler, who was on the show here, who was designing a war game and was definitely that kind of person as well. He could always spot these rules that could be broken and bent and stuff, and he'd point out all these ways that, like, for example, Warhammer 40K had made these rules that allow you, if you read them, interpret them the right way.
To the letter, which is what you do.
Yeah. And then it's like, well, this is somewhat vague phrasing even though common sense would obviously dictate it's supposed to be read one way, you can read it a different way. You can interpret it that way. And in that case, you can do X, Y, and Z. And to me, it's like, at that point, just don't play with that person. You know, I just don't.
I agree with that statement. That don't play with that person because that person's a dick. But don't write. If we're not talking on a GM level or a player level. We're talking on a writer level. Don't create that situation.
If you can avoid it, you should. But I also think that you're putting extra stress on the designer to be like.
Yes, yes, I am. Welcome to design.
Yeah, but at the cost of if you did phrase everything so technically that a rules lawyer can't get around it, is the average person. The average person will look at that and say, "I just don't want to read it." Like it's written in sort of this anal, technical way that doesn't flow well, and it's whatever. And I'm very much a believer in trying to write in a way that's like an inviting thing. And if you have a GM, if you have somebody there who's there to be a sort of enforcer of the correct interpretation of the book, I don't see much need to have, that specific of terminology and phrasing of everything. But you would also have to, like, what I'm trying to do is when I write rules, I write the reason why the rule exists alongside the rule. And I tell people, this is why this rule exists.
Oh yeah, no, you'd be out there forever, Trip. If I did that. Generally, okay. So to go off of that, you generally get a technical aspect of something. I have this mentality when it comes to awesome tactics in writing. In addition to me not trusting GMs and players and having to write a rule very carefully so that when you write it, it excludes certain things. That's the way I had to write it and the way I had to balance everything is I had to make sure that behind the scenes elegantly that the numbers and stuff didn't allow it at all. If that makes any sense, right?
Yeah.
I don't have to say, you can't reduce anything to less than one to negative combat points because the way the rules are written, there's no in-rule way to reduce something to negative combat. You cannot do it mechanically. It's not possible without cheating.
So interpretation doesn't even come into the picture because
it's mechanically impossible.
Right.
Yes. And when it becomes mechanically possible, that's when I'm like, by the way, you can't use this or reduce it below 0. So
I'm going to want you to end up reading my rules when I'm done or somebody who can think like that because I know that the way I write is going to be open to all sorts of
interpretations. But again, it also depends on what kind of game you're trying to write. If you're trying to write a rules-light game, flowery language and trusting the GM and blah, 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 that's the thing. Option Tactic is a game about combat, and combat is life or death. And life or death means lots of cheating. So there's an old saying about a gunfight. The only unfair gunfight is a gunfight you lose. So
yeah.
So that's the subject matter matters a bunch as well. Also this is just goes inside with me not trusting GMs and all that. And specifically for Option Tactic, if the book says that you can't do it, then you can't do it. If the book doesn't say you can't do it, feel free.
Right. Yeah, you definitely don't want to try to create something where it's like
because you will be there all day trying to tell
people what they can do.
Tell people what they can do and what they can't do is fine, but you'll never cover every single possible action.
Yeah.
So you have to decide: is the natural state going to be yes you can, or is the natural state going to be no you can't?
Right. Okay.
Originally, when I first started writing this, it was no you can't. Then I realized that there's so much fun shit that did I mention the psychic throwing psychic chainsaws?
I think you
last
did.
time? Yeah. Okay, yeah. That is an example of you sure as fuck can. If you follow the rules as they're written and you somehow end up at that level, go for it. Do it.
In a way, you're almost hoping as a designer that there's all sorts of surprising implications of your rules so that you yourself can play it and not already know this is the list of 1,000 things you can do in this game. You should.
Yeah. Some stuff you patch though. Some stuff you want to patch. Some things you want to patch, but some things you don't. Just like I said before, the whole reduce combat points for an attack to -0, that took playtesting. We had to figure that out. I had to actually look at all the possibilities that you can use to lower your combat points.
And that goes back to the bad games you were talking about that clearly weren't play tested, and you can kill yourself in character generation and stuff like that. It's like, when you play
I think that may have been on purpose.
Well,
Real talk. I think
either way, I think people who are making, their games now, you have to play test it obviously, but play test it in a way where you are trying to break it and see what breaks. And that's why I like your mentality that you always have with you want people to give you feedback on what they don't like and what isn't working and stuff like that, because everything's fine until something breaks, and it's like you need to find that before the players do, if you can.
Yep, that's exactly, because the worst thing that can happen to an RPG is there is one way to win. That is probably the worst thing you can ever happen to have for an RPG. A single path to victory.
Yeah. And you say that as somebody who likes to min-max, and I'm sure that's something that I have friends that are min-maxers, and, we play, whatever online RPGs or like MMOs or something like that, and they'll be addicted to a game, they'll play a game like crazy, but their complaints about it are the fact that they always play one class, and there's no reason to pick another class. And I'm like, just pick the other fucking class. Just have fun with that class. Like, you can still beat, if you can beat the game with the class, then that means it's viable.
That is an issue that's more of a psychological issue in the gaming world in general. Specifically, it hits our hobby the hardest. It's called the optimized character.
Right.
So something that I've seen, just psychologically wise, is that people there's a type of player, and this is probably because I go on TG too much, but there's a type of player that feels that if they're not putting up the best numbers or damn near close to the best numbers, they're useless.
Exactly.
They feel that that it's a binary thing. Either they're in the best or they're worthless. There is no, like, that little bit of damage that they can do is worth. It's not. You might as well not even bother. Because they're trying to optimize their character. They're trying to be the most optimal fighter, the most optimal, combatant they can be, because they feel that that's how they stay competitive. It's the whole I win D&D mentality, right?
Well, and that's what makes me crazy, is the fact that it's like they think that the skill of the game is the character creation and the optimization, not that the skill of the game.
It is.
Not that the skill of the game is managing to win with whatever you chose, which is like, if you can get to the end credits and you get the you win victory screen, it's like, what's the difference if you got there, faster than me or not? I still won, you still won, we both won.
Well, because that's not how that mentality works, at all, in fact. So basically the mentality is, I want to be, I don't want to feel like I'm useless, is what it boils down to. That's why, healers and such in a lot of RPGs are usually not played by the more seasoned players, because they feel that them losing out on the ability to heal things is a minor loss to the fact that they are now the top damage per turn, DPT.
Yeah. Well, and that's where I've seen in actual, D&D groups that I've been in, where if somebody's indecisive about what they want to be and they're just wanting to have fun, all the min-maxers will gang up to tell that person, just pick a healer, because, then they can further optimize their own character, because they really don't have to worry about, dying and stuff.
Yes.
And it's like they even start controlling the other players to be like,
pocket healers. Yes, I understand the concept.
Yeah, so it's like, to me, that's like a disease of the hobby. It's like, come on, like, why are you just ruining the variability, the possibilities that because good beats interesting every day. No, seriously, good beats interesting every day. It's nice that your character is interesting, but mine's good. So get off the way. And so now, as a designer who has that mentality, you do have that much more pressure to say there has to be viable things that are just as good.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, and to use Ops as an example, there is, unless you decide to play like a skill character or something like that, everything's pretty dangerous. I did that with having very low health. You know, not a lot of. You can't like max out on health without actually eating into combat feats and things like that. I can't say for the latest, because the latest version, the last one that's out doesn't have this correction, but the newer version that I'm going to re-releasing when I actually get finished with everything, maybe, possibly, I'm not sure, has a fix to machine pistols and submachine guns, because that was an issue. One of the things about a submachine gun and a pistol is that there's no reason to take one over an AR-15. In real life, that's the case. A carbine is pretty much always going to be a better choice.
Except portability or something.
Yeah, something like that. I made a few changes to that, so submachine guns are... I didn't nerf carbines, I made submachine guns better. Slightly better. They're still worse than carbines, but they're not as bad. But I defeated the no best weapon by just having way too many of them. There's so much choice, you can't cycle through what's best without not sacrificing, but without gimping yourself in another way. For example, there was a guy with a machine gun, right? That's all nice and cool, but you get in the melee range and he's fucked up. The hard part is getting into melee range. He's not very foot mobile either, because he's, weighed down with armor and ammunition, shit like that.
Yeah.
But in his element, he's great. Shotguns. I love shotguns. I think shotguns are the best. But they have high damage and they're very cheap, but they have a tendency to, as they go out in distance, they also lose damage.
Yeah.
You could switch over to slugs, but then you're actually sacrificing accuracy instead. Cause a shotgun with a slug will never be as accurate as a rifle.
Well, no, it's not rifled.
Yes. You can rifle it. You can put a rifle barrel on a slug, but it still won't be able to hit those same marks, because you can't match barrel a slug barrel.
Right.
So it will never hit that you can get away with sniping with a shotgun, but you won't do the same as it was with an actual built rifle. Yeah, you don't want to have a best. You never want to have a best overall or a best in multiple situations.
Yeah, you want to have, it sounds like you want to have, like, from your design philosophy,
everything's got to be viable. Everything's got to be viable in some type of situation. And in the case of two things that are viable in the same area, it's got to be a coin flip.
See, I find it interesting that you don't seem to emphasize in your game a long progression of, sort of little commitments that add up into optimal characters. It's more like choices that anybody can make.
2 feet to level. No, we're not playing that. We're not playing that long game.
And do you do that because you want to avoid that sort of weird rabbit trail of this is the path you have to take to get optimal and stuff? You just want to make it so that everybody can sort of be on the same level if they want to, and just make, emphasize the choices you make in the moment kind of thing?
Well, it's not even that. It's that I don't want... So the reason I cut the thing, it was originally I cut it down to 8, but I put it brought it up to 10. The reason I cut it from 20 levels to 10 is because they're dead levels. Like, nah.
Yeah.
Progression only matters when people care about their character for a long term. When you design a game around that, you alienate people like me who, don't want to have to go through 13 iterations to get 6 feats. Like,
right.
Dead levels are a problem.
Right. And if you have high lethality in your game and you would basically encourage like shorter campaigns and more.
I've seen not from with a long campaign, but I've seen it run with long campaigns. But because you get more choice every time, you get 2 feats instead of 1 every 4 levels. 2 feats per level versus 1 feat every. I think it's either every 2 levels or every level is a big difference. So like when a lot of people see the system, they go, "I get 2 feet to level." Like it's crazy to them because they've never experienced that before.
I love that idea. I guess what I'm making the mistake right now of going against what you were talking about of designing the game bottom up. I'm looking at it from a top down point of view and thinking, what kind of vision did you have of how the game should play? And you didn't really design it that way, right? And you were talking last time, I think after the podcast, you said we were talking about which one is more unique and what you can get out of, the problem with being generic and also trying to be unique by doing top down versus bottom up. And I know we did talk about that last time, but I still want to talk about that a little more because.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah.
When you have the mechanics first and you have sort of this methodology for what should be in the game, what shouldn't be, you do have a very clear idea of what the game was about or not. Like you said, cars are simplified and guns are complex, and that's because the game is not about cars, the game is about guns. So to me, that's like a top-down decision to say, well, this is a game about ops and tactics. It's about these things. But it sounds like you didn't really apply that to, the long-term progression sort of idea. You were just trying to avoid a certain thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that you had a vision of, as somebody who min-maxes and can rule lawyer and all that stuff. Here's how I'm going to cleverly bypass that, and I'm going to, incentivize them to come in that way and that way. There wasn't a lot of theory behind it. Is more based on play testing, more based on, I'm
use
guessing
case.
when you actually get some feedback, you know what you want to play, and you're just making what you enjoy. And then when you get feedback, you can correct. And so it's not as much about some sort of grand vision of how things should be.
Yeah, grand vision. Grand visions can fuck up rules. That's why I don't bother with that kind of stuff. Grand vision, the grand vision, like if I had to give you a grand vision, I'd be like, have a bunch of guns in an RPG. That's my grand vision. Have a bunch of guns in an RPG. Doesn't get more simpler than that, right?
Right.
But
be
yeah,
better than D20 Modern is like, it's not that great.
It's pretty open-ended. There's no commitment. There's not like anything where I can, where I have to like, well, I'm trying to make an RPG that caters to, the trucker community or some shit like that. Like, no, it's base and it's simple because that's all I need for that.
Yeah, I'm guilty of the opposite. I mean, I didn't start with a vision at all of what I wanted in my game, but over time, as I've gotten more opinionated, as somebody who is looking into different RPGs, it's like now I'm taking my opinions on RPGs and I'm trying to think on a very high level how I can solve things. And I appreciate guys like you, and I know that Tom Jensen in there, he's put out a bunch of games and stuff. You're already out there making stuff, and people are playing it and having fun with it, and nobody's doing shit with my game because it's not actually finished. And part of that is because you're trying to vision.
Okay, because it's the artist versus the mechanic type of. An artist tries to make a vision, makes you think, blah 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 blah. But if your goal is to make people think about stuff, then you're going to neglect the rules. If their goal is to have good rules, you're probably going to neglect making people think.
Huh? Never thought of it as a trade-off.
It's a definite trade-off. You're definitely trading off something for something else because your time is finite. It's not infinite. So you have to pick something. I picked rules because to me, that is what makes a game unique. I don't give even a quarter of a fuck about the setting of a system. I look at a system's combat and I go, oh look, it just uses 2d6. It's boring. Why would I play this? And it's just like, put the storyline. I don't give a shit about the storyline. Like, right. What does it do interesting mechanically that I can't make up myself or use options?
I like that as an observation. If it is a trade-off between like thinking about, sort of higher concept stuff versus much more practical, implementation, that would also go back to the GM having to make decisions on the fly versus just look up the rules. This sort of mental capacity, the load that people can carry at once, you do kind of have to make a choice of, I can either have rules.
Do I want to worry about the mechanics or I want to worry about the storyline?
Yeah.
And my job is to worry about the mechanics. It's the GM's job to worry about the storyline.
Exactly. Whereas, you could make it so that there's, the GM should be worried about the mechanics and have a lot of say in how situations play out. But
there are games like that.
But then you would have to some extent, that's probably why rules light systems put so much of the creative storytelling burden on the players, because somebody has to take up the slack, because the GM is worried about what should you roll, what is even the correct thing to do here. So he can't.
Should I have them roll mental, or should I have them roll dexterity? Should I have them roll, he wants to shoot a guy with a gun, but it's not, but the actual shooting aspect, because it's pressed against the guy's muzzle, is fun. So I guess he shouldn't really worry about having to hit him, because he's going to hit him. But there's a lot of stress involved with this. So maybe I should have him roll a mental to get over the stress of blowing some dude's brains out in front of him. Like the GM has to worry about that in a rules light system. In option tactics, that's taken care of. Press against the muzzle, that's called a no miss shot. He gets an AOP. If he misses, if he fails AOP, you shoot him in the head.
Yeah.
Done. Like, a GM doesn't have to think about, pressing a gun against a muzzle, because it's already taken care of.
Yeah. And if to what extent do you start worrying about bloat, like rules bloat?
Ooh. You want an honest answer, or you want an angry answer?
I want an angry answer.
Okay, angry answer is when anybody says that that insert feature here is bloat. Then I usually rip it out and shove it up their ass. A real answer is when I can't justify it to myself why this is why am I spending so much time on this rule?
So it's a personal sense of what, the amount of time you're spending on it. Like, that's just interesting to me that there is a threshold at which, you have to say the GM has to make a decision if this happens.
Because I could go very deep into the craft writing, for example. I could go through the roles, because craft writing is really simple. It's like, you write a novel or you write a paper. What do you get? You can sell it, make money. Whoopity-doo. Craft visual art, it's the same thing. Like, I could have gone really deep into that. All right. I could have gone, okay, so you can decide what kind of artistic style you're going to make the painting out of. You can decide, if you're going to do monochrome or color that will reduce or increase the DC or whatever. Blah, blah. I could have did all that, right?
Yeah.
Could have went super deep in it. Why? What does that have to do about shooting people?
Well, and that's the thing is you have such a clear core premise of your game, whereas a lot of people, especially in a generic system, if they're trying to make something generic,
I would never recommend anybody to make a fully generic system like GURPS. There's a reason for it. There's a reason that GURPS is written by a team of people.
Right. And why they put out 1 million splat books that are also researched by teams of people.
Teams of people. GURPS is not a singular project. And to be perfectly honest with you, there's no real reason to try and emulate GURPS. That's why people always tell me, well, why don't I just play GURPS? And I'm like, I'm not out here trying to replace GURPS. GURPS has a purpose. GURPS does things that Ops outright refuses.
Yeah.
So there's I'm not gonna be worried about prehistoric combat. I'm not gonna be worried about, honestly, really space combat and futuristic stuff to 200, 300 years in the future. I'm not worried about that. It's not Ops' focus,
Yeah.
We don't have disintegrator rifles in Ops. We don't have, that's not my focus. But when it comes to modern guns and shit, yeah, that's my lock. I'm taking that shit. I'm taking that crown back. Because that's what my focus is. But when you're talking about writing a generic system to the same level of GURPS.
Well, I don't know if anybody's doing that, but I have heard other guys talk about doing a generic rules light kind of thing, a generic.
Oh, that's already been done too. It's called Dungeon World.
Oh yeah.
Or Apocalypse World.
And last time you were talking about, or I guess after the podcast maybe, I can't remember. You were talking about when you don't create everything together, like when you had the D&D problem, you called it.
Yeah, that was on camera.
Yeah.
I mean, podcast, whatever. Yeah, the D&D effect. If you don't write everything together, some shit's going to be broken.
Right.
And the more books that you write, the more possibilities for shit to be broken.
Yeah, and you were saying that every time you introduce something new, you have to consider all of the other books that are already out if they're supposed to be compatible with each other, and it becomes exponentially.
or you have to say, use this book with it, like what GURPS does. Use this book with this book and nothing else.
Oh, right. Okay.
Because GURPS does do that. It says, well, it doesn't say that outright, but it's like, these books are enjoyed best with blank.
I'm interested, obviously you're putting out extra material and stuff. You're dealing with this personally, but you also have that mentality where you're good at spotting things that would break other options if you combine certain options and different things. And for somebody like myself, where I'm like, here's just more stuff, and isn't that fun? Like, I guess that the lesson for guys like me, and I know a lot of other guys that are in GDG, that's a lesson that needs to be learned, not only because it will end up badly, but because you'll spend so much time working on something, and then it could all be for waste if there ends up being just a broken, combination that ends up coming out of it. So I think before you do anything like that, before you want to bite off more than you can chew, it would be a good idea to.
What I would say is write it small. Write one. So a little unknown thing was that in the older version of Ops and Tactics, I did that. I did the add-ons and things. I didn't do them in the big chunk of Modern Magicka that you see. Okay?
Right.
Modern Magicka originally was just magic. It was just magic and that's it. It didn't have anything else. Well, the magic and the races and everything like that. What I also had were things called supply drop. A supply drop was a PDF no bigger than 20 pages. Yeah, I think most of them were around like 8-10 pages that had a little bit of rules, right? Like just psionic, or just these weird guns, or just, I actually have them. Let me go and open. Oh God, please, God damn. Load faster. You're on a solid state drive. Why are you so slow? Jesus Christ.
We can cut out the silence in editing.
It's not that. I wish this motherfucker would go faster. But no, yeah. So I had little supply drops, and they were just simple, singular add-ons to rules that were self-contained, right?
Right.
That made it very easy for me to evaluate a single rule set because it wasn't.
Because you were saying that you'd try to change one thing at a time and then see what effect it has.
See what
right?
it did. Yeah. Let me actually go to the old PDFs. Yeah. Okay. So supply drops. I actually found them. So we had some equipment, some big guns. Number 2 had riot gear and SWAT equipment. Number 3 was actually the simple firearms rule set. So it was just like simplified guns and stuff like that for people who didn't care about guns. Number 4 was a bunch of SBRs and things like that. Number 5 was fantasy weapons. What is this? So fantasy weapons, like the lawgiver and the gas-operated chainsaw, and gas-operated rocket launcher, just a bunch of dumb gun shit, right?
Right.
Yeah. Number 6 was odd calibers and odd guns. Most of these were equipment supply drops. Number 7, number 8, and number 9 were, I'll check them. So number 7 was actually a sniper add-on, like how to run it had some sniper upgrades and things like that. And it added on like things for a sniper to use, right?
Right.
But it also explained how to play a sniper, how to run for a sniper. So that was like a bolt-on thing. Okay? So
you're doing a little bit of education in there as well.
Yeah. Number 8 was, this was the customize your own character thing. We still had, that's old. And, a race building mechanic where you built your own race and stuff like that. This is old enough. So that, this was just a small thing I could add and remove at will. But the reason I'm mentioning these is because I could do them in chunks. I didn't have to go and add psionics and invocation and this and that all at the same time,
Yeah.
I could chop them up and do them one at a time. And that's what I would say is for somebody who wants to add things to their game, do that. Don't add everything all at once. Add chunks. If it's new rules, break it down to a point where it's a section of rules that are kind of together and kind of match up, you know?
Yeah. It's very tempting from a designer point of view to want to make something major and then, hopefully you would get this
break
whole
everything.
resurge of interest in your game and all that kind of stuff, whereas a smaller update would be like, if you're already playing, here's something new. It's like, but, it's from a marketing perspective, there would also be some appeal to trying to package things. And
you'd be surprised how much interest. I was very surprised at how much interest each supply drop actually brought.
The way that this is just something I was thinking of with I'm trying to get more insight into your mentality as a designer and as somebody who's good at min-maxing. It seems to me like there's a tendency for guys like you to have a focus on equipment, and like if you go to like Diablo and these other sort of like really loot heavy games where the end game is almost always better loot and stuff like that. There's something interesting there. I can't quite figure out what it is, but it's like.
For me specifically, it's not even better equipment or stuff like that. It is to a sense, but I like lots of stuff.
Well, yeah, it's variety, but
because that's what makes the character interesting. Because particularly for a modern game, particularly for Ops and Tactics, there's no special unique snowflakes in Ops and Tactics. What make you different are your things you have learned, your skills, your feats, your abilities, what you can do with them, what you do with them.
Yeah, like the choices you make in fights.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you have I'm going to quickly explain what you explained on the GDG channel about your magic system, because you were talking a little bit about magic on the podcast last time, but you explained on the channel that you actually had this system for writing your spells down on different material, and that depending on the material you wrote it on and how permanent of a thing it is, like, stitching something into leather versus, writing it on paper versus carving it in stone, that is actually what determines how many times you can use the spells on it
before it burns up. Yeah. Like you can, to give it a quick example, if you write it on printer paper, the shitty bulk printer paper, you cast it one time, it burns up, that's it, right? You go into the stationery store, you get yourself some nice cotton paper that can probably be cast 2 or 3 times. Like you can cast that spell, boom, you have to rewrite it. You still got it. You still got 2 more. You can cast it again, boom. Cast 1 more time, boom. Then it burns up. Yes.
Yeah, and then so the focus, like turning it into a material component and having that sort of be this balancing point, seems like that's sort of where I'm getting at with, not that you as a player, want to have bigger and better guns all the time, and that's why you add a lot, but isn't it easier to balance everything when it's an item, and the logic of how exactly it works can be fine-tuned on that level, as opposed to, character and system level changes, and if somebody could accuse you of having a bloat in the terms of how much guns and stuff you have and ammo types and everything you have, but it has to be easier to balance things on an item by item basis, and so in that sense it's pretty smart.
It is easier, but the reason that it's used, it's a better, in my opinion, it's a better way to do it, is because it's easier to, not just to balance, but to explain. It's a whole lot easier for me, like, if I explain and say that, okay, so mental limit, for example, is the thing that it's based off of your level, which I know people don't like levels, fuck them. Your level and your wisdom score. I think your wisdom modifier, exactly. No, it's probably your score. No, it's your modifier. So it's based off of that, right? That's how many spells you can remember at one time. That's what the actual lore and rules say. Okay? Because better memory, better wisdom, better memory, right? The actual physical aspect of writing a spell and casting a spell is better balanced in the physical realm, because one could always just bullshit and say, well, I know, it's a whole lot easier for people to accept a physical limitation than a mental, if that makes sense.
Exactly. I think that's what I was trying to get at, is that it's a clever, practical way of limiting things and explaining it at the same time. you can have and you can, somebody in the chat, they were basically making fun of the idea by saying, oh, so if you laser etch it on titanium, it's infinite. And you're like, yeah, but
yeah.
the trade-off is that you're stuck with that set then, because you can't do more on the side.
You can't you'd have to, you can't use that memory in your brain because it's already it's literally etched into metal. So that memory in your brain, you can't force yourself to forget it. You can pretend like you don't remember it, but you remember it. So, because of the effort taken to do that, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So the downside is that while you have that spell forever, your magical skill set stays the same, even if you grow as a mage.
Yeah. Yes. I don't know. I find it fascinating that you have such a pragmatic approach to designing these things and adding them in, because it really is, as far as I know, that's a very unique take on magic. And I've heard other guys. I think
somebody else has done it before.
What's that?
I think somebody's done that way before. I don't remember, but.
Well, at the very least, I can say that, it's, I've seen other people try to even, have the idea of the spell components be the limiting factor, and the spell book, and then you have to write it off and whatever. And sometimes they even, try to make it a pain in the ass for the player themselves to be able to do, like they have to write stuff and do a bunch of extra work, so that you're just literally punishing players for wanting to do more.
Well, I mean, I did that though. I did that with Magic. The player has to build the spell.
But that's fun. I mean, that's not really a restriction. That would get me more interested in doing spells, not less.
Yeah, I mean, and this is just on the player on the player GM writer side, like the out of character side. Yeah, you don't want to make it harder for players because they're not going to do it. Magic, like in Magic and Option Tactics, does have a bit of a learning curve. I think I said this before, but one of my playtests was like, I love the way Magic is because it makes me feel like a real mage without having to actually do all the real mage math. Cause it's basic algebra, add, subtract, stuff like that. That's basic algebra for all three Magics actually. But, I wanted to make I wanted to make the material components matter, but I didn't want to do it in a bullshit way. That's why you write Magic like that.
Yeah. No, I thought that was a great solution in the end, and I'm trying to see what other wisdom I can squeeze out of you here, because it's very interesting to me that you managed to get something that, when people actually look at it, there's so much meat on the bone, there's so much like substance to it, but it doesn't seem to have fallen apart, and you're very aggressive to try to fix problems and still put up more content in a way that I would think that would just totally break it, but you've still managed to keep it balanced and interesting. Do you have like a blog or something that people can go and like?
I have an Option Tactics blog, but that's mostly just, at this point, that's just to let people know what I've done and releases, and I'm not dead. I don't I don't think of it. A lot of stuff I don't think in high level. I think very low level. I look at Option Tactics as a system of systems.
Yeah.
It is a conglomeration of various minor, smaller systems. The Magic system, for example, requires, like, when you break it down to its base component, I said, okay, what do you need for Magic? You need a writing utensil and you need a writing medium. Okay? Once you confine yourself to those two things, you then go, I then did this. I went and I looked at a bunch of writing mediums. Like, okay, paper, bricks, walls.
Clay.
Drawing on clay. I wouldn't want to make a spell in clay. That'd be fucking terrible.
Come on.
But like whiteboard, chalkboards, wax tablets. Like, I looked up everything that humankind has written on.
Yeah.
And then, okay, is there a quality difference in between these? Let's take paper. Yes, there is. There's a huge quality difference. So I can use that quality difference to increase something. What can I increase? What can I play around with that quality would matter? In the fact of guns, it means for accuracy, capacity, caliber, whatever.
Right, yeah.
In Magic, I'm not going to make a spell better just because you wrote on better paper. However, I am going to say you can use that spell more before it breaks down. That I can work with. You get more ammunition with that spell based on the quality of paper you use.
But even there, I thought it was so clever to say, like, there would actually be a strategic reason to use shitty paper if you only want to use a spell once, right?
That is correct.
So even there, you're not creating an objective best. It's not like everybody will ultimately want to laser etch on titanium. They will want to use the medium that's appropriate for how many times they want to use a given spell. So even there, you're not creating this thing that people are going to all end up at the same point.
So yeah. And when I went to mediums, I mean, utensils, I looked at it the same way. Like, what kinds of pens are there? And pro tip, the pen is a motherfucker. There are lots of different, like, I went as back as far as I could to basic writing. And basic writing is basically a reed pen where you take a reed, you cut it like at an angle, so it's got a nice point to it, you dip it and you write on it, right?
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, so when would you want to use something in a more pure aspect over something like that's been industrialized? Because again, magic is industrialized. A magic shop in Ops and Tactics probably looks like a staple. There's one of our art director who he's a nice guy, but he's like you guys. He's very high level.
Yeah.
You know? And he hates that idea. He says that I have killed magic. It is so it's not whimsical. And I'm like, you're right, it's not. It's the opposite. It is.
I would never mock you for that. I know you did kill magic, but you're doing the trade-off.
Because that's what would happen in a real world, my opinion anyway. Is that magic, the first thing we do is we would figure out, is it repeatable? Can we make a science out of it?
Exactly.
Can we increase the what's the phrase? Can we increase the quality of things? What can we do with it in the industrial world? So better papers, better spells. Now, the funny part about it is that there's something called spell inks, okay?
Yeah.
Spell inks are basically high quality inks that improve. They give you more spell points to work with outside of your mental limit thing. No. They're still within your mental limit, but you can spend more points. Like if I only have a 10 in evocation, but I use a Mastercraft spell ink which has a 10, I can use 20. The downside is my mental limit does not increase as well. So I can make a more powerful spell, but I'm stuck with a mental limit. The funny thing about it is that the higher level spell inks don't come in like big pen packs. You have to get a real pen. You have to get a real fountain pen or a dip pen or whatever and actually write it like that. So the downside is that while it's more powerful mechanically, it's less portable.
Man, I tip my hat to you for coming up with this and just committing to it and being like, yeah, that's how it works. I don't care if people think that it's not whimsical and there's not a bunch of mystique around it, because obviously magic inherently is like illusionism. That's where in real life, it's all about. It's
a science.
You turn it into a science, and it doesn't lose any of its effectiveness in the game. And you manage to create, like you said, a system of systems instead of having hand waving and a bunch of fluff needed.
There is some hand waving. Like you can't break the laws of thermodynamics with evocation. That's one thing. You can't do it to an egregious manner. I know you can chill things and heat things up and light like cigarettes and fires and stuff with it, but for the most part, those are cantrips. Those are small things. Generally, you can't break the laws of thermodynamics. You can't break the law of equivalent exchange. You can, but there's a special singular one item called a artifact, which is basically there's one of this thing, deal with it, that can break the law of thermodynamics. It's weird. You'd have to read the book to check it. But no, it's a system of systems. That's how you look at it. You look at what the system within the system, what are the parameters of this system that we're building. And
what are the implications of that too? Because, if you just...
Well, the implications come after the fact. Like, he was the one who mentioned the Staples thing, and I was like, that's pretty... That's fucking hilarious. Like, when we actually came with a bunch of mundane things that would be in everybody, like the toothbrush that cures hangovers. That was pretty funny too. He said it as like an insult, and we were like, "That's a good idea. We should add that." But yeah, it's you have to, when you're building something complex like that, you have to break away from the full system and look at it as a separate system on its own, a separate little rule set on its own.
Right, but I have a feeling you're still the type of person that looks at the bigger picture and sees, what the ecosystem of the balance of the whole thing. You still have the designer instinct to not, magic suddenly trumps guns and now suddenly guns aren't, because you're still trying to fit it into. For
a little while, actually, that was an after effect, actually. So, the first real iteration of that, magic was just blowing guns out the water. So we had to go back and tweak it. There was two things that got removed immediately. The first thing was the ability to increase your combat points, which are how many things you can do in a round. There was a spell that allowed you to do that. That was a runaway thing, because you could cast it if you got the right paper and the right spell inks. You could essentially cast it and stack it to over 100 combat points a turn, and you could just you're moving like the Flash. You're just, I hit this dude for 8 times. I run over here. I hit this dude for 8 times. I run over here. I hit this dude for 8 times. Like it was broken as shit. The other thing that I actually came to a realization of is that magic was too short range to be, specifically evocation, because there's 2 real combat magics in the game. It's evocation and necromancy. Evocation is your standard fireball, ice ball, sonic ball, acid ball, electric ball. Those 5 elements, right?
Yeah.
It was originally range, not range increments. So 5 feet that's it. You can cast it at 5 feet.
Oh, right. And now you built it so that the spell becomes more costly as you bring it up to.
Well, no. I mean like it was to be able to hit somebody across a 25-foot room. You'd burn through a lot of your damage because you'd be spending points on range and not damage.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I had to change it to range increment so that it follows the standard range increment rules in the game, where 5-foot range increment means that you can attempt a 20 range attack, but you're going to take a -6 to it, but you can still attempt it.
Yeah.
So that was one issue where magic was just way too short. So we had to change it up a little because, that was a problem. Yeah,
man, I definitely want to read this. I've been trying to figure out licks and other stuff, so that's what I've been doing, but I want to read your material. I actually want to read through it, and Psionics was far more interesting of a story than Magic was. Magic was pretty straightforward. So Psionics originally was basically avatar bending. Some playtesters essentially told me, that's nice and all, but what if there's no water? And I didn't get it until they hit me across the head with it. Like, you're not saying liquid, you're saying water. And because you're so specific, it only works with water. So that's why that got blended a little bit. So it's more Jedi-y now than is avatar bendy. It's still got that taste. You can still taste it, but it's very Jedi-like. I think I'm picking up a pattern here, which is what I'm trying to, one of the things I'm trying to look for is the fact that your approach, because it's not high level and you're starting at a very low level perspective, I personally, if I did that and I'm like, somebody broke my system and they had, 100 stacking action points in one turn and all that, I would take it very personally. I would be devastated. Wow. And then I would go and say, well, I failed. I'm a shitty game designer. And then, wow. And then because I would have put all this forethought into it, and then I would have expected it to work correctly the first time, whereas you have the exact opposite approach, which is make something, obviously you do try to be smart about it at the beginning, but
I never expect shit to work the first time. If it works the first time, I am surprised as fuck. The only thing that's worked the first time without any change is transmutation. that is the only spell series that has worked without any major modification.
Exactly.
And I say that, yeah.
So then from your design philosophy, and this is also something that Tom Jensen and some of these other guys were talking about, is if you approach it with this sort of rapid iterations and not expecting things to work, not overthinking it at the start, but just letting people play test it, letting people give you feedback, use that feedback to do stuff, it's a lot more efficient, and you get results that are backed up by experience and play testing versus a theoretical system that hasn't really been put to the test, and you can't iterate on it because it hasn't been exposed to all the shit that will break it yet.
Yep. That's something that I would definitely say that people need to do, is definitely first of all, don't take shit personally. That's the first thing.
Well, it's hard. For me, it's hard not to, but
the games, dude, they're games.
I'm mature enough that I wouldn't actually, but I would try to. I know it would be a factor if I was putting out, something and nothing worked the way I thought it would. It would be like, why did I spend the time doing this? It's kind of an instinct, but you have to overcome that and be like, well, okay, no, we're making a product, and people are. That's the point of playtesting, is people are going to break it.
Yeah, that's the whole reason I always release my shit on 4chan, because I want to see if there's anything I missed. Because I want to see if there's anything I missed. I want to see if there's anything my playtesters missed. I want to see if there's anything that was missed.
And 4chan will definitely try to break it.
Yeah, that's the first thing they try and do, because they want to make they get joy from watching you fail. that is what it boils down to. They gain joy from watching you fail.
That ends up being a very trial. It's
a very useful tool. It's a very useful tool.
Yeah. You
can't have an ego. That's the thing. You cannot have an ego, and you cannot be emotionally invested in the thing that you're testing, because if it breaks, oh shit, my ego.
Yeah. Well, and then even that, if you not that, I know that there's guys working on games right now that they wouldn't never say that they have an ego, but they're just sensitive about the idea of, people. It's just a disappointment thing. They think less of themselves as a result. But if you're looking at it as being something that you set your expectations differently, that it's going to be broken and it's your job to fix it.
Yeah.
Then,
because it is your job to fix it, because that's the job of the designer.
Right. And then in that case, you're also not, you're looking forward to, you're actually anticipating that feedback, because that's good news. Now you know what you can fix, and it's not something that you're dreading, somebody breaking it. You're more,
because when and I'm pretty much at the end. Like, I've gotten to the point where you can't really break it anymore at this point. Like, the reason I was pointing people to the stuff that's on the website right now, even though it's not the latest version, is that version works. That version is perfectly 100% capable. Like, I can release it, but there's a few minor creature comforts and things that I wanted to add to the game before I sent it out. Right. And I say a few, and then I look at my change log, and I'm just like, oh yeah, only 100 lines of things that I've changed. But most of them are just creature comforts. Most of them are just, small design changes. There was no like emergency, oh shit, this is super broken, let me fix that. We've already got to that.
Yeah.
Most of the things in my changelog for the final one are just shit I literally missed. Shit I forgot to add. Like, or shit that needs to just be gone, just because it didn't do anything. Like, vestigial rule.
Mm-hmm.
Every rule should have a reason for existing in your game. There should never be a rule set or something like that where you go, I mean, that's cool and all, but why is it in the game? Like, what does it add?
I'm very curious in your particular game what that would be, because you seem to be the kind of person who wouldn't add those in the first place.
I'll give you a great one. Gender as a stat.
Right.
I removed that in the version that's coming out. I removed it from the game, from the core rulebook mentionings in like other things about your character.
So I'm guessing that you didn't have like mechanical effects tied to it, but you're saying just.
Oh yeah, no, I didn't.
So, but even then, why mention it if it doesn't have a mechanical effect attached to it? I'm guessing that's what you're coming at now.
Well, yeah, it was that plus the whole I'm not going to get started in this gender politics argument bullshit. I don't care. Ops doesn't care. You shouldn't care either. And it's a whole lot easier for me to just remove it than it is to me to argue about why I shouldn't have to remove it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Interesting. We're past the 2-hour mark now again.
Hooray!
I'm going to say that I'm really looking forward to. You seem to have a pretty good stream of content that you've been putting out, and you have decent plans for what you want to do next, and it's going to be coming out soon, right?
Yeah. I'm still saying the 15th, but I'm not as confident about that.
I'm hoping by the time this comes out, it's out, and
it's already out. But I mean, like the final version. I've still got to proofread the rest of the advanced arms. I've still got to go through the entire core rulebook again, but there's a whole lot less that needs to be changed since we already proofread it once before. And I've still got to probably do a second proofread of Modern Magicka, and I've got to do a beautification edit of Modern Magicka as well. So probably, as much as I want to say the 15th, probably not the 15th, but soon.tm.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
I like to release them all at once. So, and then I've still got to wait for my dude with the he's changing all of the monsters to make them look a little bit better. But other than that, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think everybody should, if you're going to be sticking around on GDG, I hope people will come by and give you a lot of feedback on everything once it comes out officially and once it's all ready, and just stay tuned to what you're doing, because you're a very, very interesting creator, putting out a lot of substantial stuff. You're not the kind of person who's, like me, talking about it but never actually putting anything out.
Well, I'm putting it out because I want to play it and I want to see it. That's primarily why I put shit out, because I want to play it, and I can't play it if I don't put it out, and I can't put it out if I don't finish it. So I got to finish it to put it out to play it.
Yep.
That's probably one of the reasons why this game has persisted for so long, is that it's not because I've seen a lot of people who make games, but they don't have a personal investment in the game. They don't. Okay, let's take Wizards of the Coast, right? They have a monetary investment. If they don't put out new games, they don't make money.
Right.
People stop buying books. So they hire people and they pay them with the expectation that you will put this out because we need you to because we won't pay you if you don't. Okay?
Yeah.
So that gives them some type of motivation to put.
So they will definitely finish it.
My motivation is I want to play the damn game. I write this because I want to play it, not because I'm trying to be artistic about it.
Yeah.
If you don't want to play your own game, don't start writing it.
Yeah, I think that's,
Also, if you feel like you have to write a game to play a setting, reevaluate yourself.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I've seen a lot of people who will write a system just for a setting, and it'll be that's one reason why D&D but exists.
Right.
Because a lot of people...
It's like, why bother calling it something different if it's essentially just a setting change?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
and that's also why people justify, using D&D for all sorts of stuff, just because, it is open to different settings so easily.
Yeah, you need a damn good reason. You need a damn good reason for writing a system. You need to be doing some shit that's different mechanically.
Exactly.
You do not need to be doing D&D but. Like I said, when Ops and Tactics first started, I didn't have that.
Yeah. I've seen again and again on GDG, I've seen on the threads, I've seen people come in and sometimes the answer is just use GURPS, or something like if you don't want to actually put in that's the other thing is like people have a unique idea, but they're expecting other people to suggest the mechanics to them and stuff, and it's like you also need to have the fortitude and the determination to actually fully finish a system. If you're just going to make part of it or whatever, it's like here's the thing: if you're going to make part of it, make part of it. If
I mean, one could argue that the magic system and option tactics by itself could replace another system's magic. It would probably need to be rewritten a little bit, but it could definitely replace D&D's magic. Just outright. Rip the whole damn thing out, right?
Yeah.
If you only are doing this to change one thing, then just write the one thing you're going to change.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Because originally option tactics started from a single rule change. It was I created a caliber chart, so the guns did damage by caliber.
Right.
Okay, I tried to use that, but I hit a wall to a point where it's like, well, okay, I have to change this, I have to change that, I have to change this, I have to change that. So it got to the point where I was just like, well, fuck it, I'll just write a new system. So I did. So I actually went and changed. Like, that's why option tactics exists, because I could not. Changing a single rule didn't work.
It needed to be a system.
It was too many rule changes for it to be. It was too many bolt-on solutions for it to work well.
Right.
A single bolt-on solution, yes. 2, maybe. 3, 4, and you need to start looking at actually writing. And I'm talking major shit, not like, well, this is the D1, this is the +1 instead of a +2. Like major, like the combat system. If you have to do major overhaul to a combat system, then use that as a base for a new system.
Yeah, and you can just make a combat system. You don't have to make a setting with it. You don't have to make all sorts of other changes and pitch it as being a replacement to D&D.
That is correct.
You can have a system that is only, essentially would be considered a subsystem in a bigger system.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's good advice as well. I really don't like to see people biting off more than they can chew. And
most people do.
Yeah. I don't feel like that with my own yet, because I'm getting closer to actually finishing it, and I know I'm going to finish it, but definitely there was a long period of just not having a clear premise, not having a target audience in mind, all sorts of things. Like it just was floating, and it wasn't really grounded to anything and not aimed at anything. But
do you have a target audience? And
yeah.
What is that target audience?
It's basically GDG and TG.
Okay, that's too big of a target audience. You're going to need to trim that up.
Well, all right. Also, myself and my immediate, relatives and people that are interested in playing it. But
still a pretty big target. Still a pretty big thing, though. Like, when I say a target, like, okay, so my target for option tactics is people who care about guns in RPG. People who care about guns at all. People who like guns. Gun people. That is my target. That's a very specific, defined
demographic
target. Yeah, it's not K in general, because that's too broad. But it's also not everybody who I know, because that's too specific. Because with either of those you're going to get problems. If it's too broad, you'll get the GURPS issue. If it's too specific, it'll be inaccessible to people outside of that group. But gun people is pretty, wide, if that makes sense. It's big enough to where it's you can market it to, there are people you can market to, but it's small enough to where it fits a niche where that isn't being fit right now.
Right. There's not a lot of competition in that specific.
Yeah. The only competition I can think of is GURPS, and the only GURPS and I blew GURPS competition kind of out the water. So. Yeah. Yeah. Because High Tech, as good as a book it is, has not been updated.
Right.
High Tech is kind of a it's kind of a, okay, gun people, we know you like guns, so here you go. Here's a book that you can use and abstract and go from there. That's what High Tech was. And it does that very well, but High Tech is not the focus of GURPS. High Tech is one of the many modules that GURPS has.
Yeah. If you want something that's built from the ground up with doing one thing extremely well, or a handful of things extremely well,
and a bunch of shit just terribly, there you go.
Yeah.
As somebody quoted, the farther you get away from shooting the man, the worse option tactics become, which is 100% true. Seriously, literally, the farther you get from combat, the worse option tactics does. Somebody wanted to use option tactics for some Digimon game I think they were going to run, and I told them straight up, you're going to have a bad time.
I'm trying to imagine somebody doing that.
I don't know why he picked it, but I told him straight up, like, it's not what it's made for, it's not what its focus is, and it's not going to be good. It's going to be very, very bad. And he was actually surprised because he's like, didn't you write it? I'm like, yeah, I wrote it. But I know the system, and I know what it can do and what it can't do. And I can tell you right now, it can't do that. People have been asking me for the longest time as a meme. We have lots of tactics. But like, when are mechs going to be in the game?
Yeah.
Never. Want to know why? Because BattleTech has that shit on lock.
Oh yeah.
So there is no reason for me to compete with mechs because I couldn't do mechs justice.
Yeah.
Oh, we've also started for the brainstorming aspect for Manlet, which I haven't quite thought about what to call it yet, but the racing game with the cars and such.
Okay.
So yeah, the problem is that I'm not as big as a car person as I am a gun person, so I need to co-op people to know cars.
Wait, so now you are doing cars?
Sure, why not? But no, this is gonna be a separate system. So basically, it's like I almost said combat racing, but I guess it will kind of is combat racing. But it's not gonna be like Twisted Metal. It's gonna be like Fast and Furious.
Yeah, you just lost a customer. I love Twisted Metal.
I like Twisted Metal too, but it ain't about cars and guns. It's about shit like I made a joke where it's like the automatic transmission. You don't have to roll any dice to shift, but you take minuses to thing.
Oh,
so it's like easy mode. Yeah, so it's like when it like to just to give you an example of that. If I was going to start this from scratch, I would look at, first of all, what's important on the car, especially a car you're going to be racing. I would look at, can the system simulate or at least approximate that thing in numbers? Third thing is that what is like the driver of the car is important as well, probably as much as the shooter of a firearm. So what stats about driving matter? Right.
You're modeling a bunch of real things in mathematical and in mechanical terms.
But only the things that matter.
Right.
Because if it doesn't matter, like it doesn't matter if the guy is, if he's a great shot with a handgun. It does matter if he knows how to perfectly feather his clutch and his drive pedal to drift, while he's, fucking around with the clutch and shit like that. Like that matter. Like.
And then eventually you get the guy from the Transporter movies.
Shift dexterity, clutch, pedal dexterity, shift dexterity, drive, stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And then because you know your topic and you know the premise of what you're trying to make, you can actually research it and be like, oh, well, downforce and, the grip of the traction on the different
the tires
surfaces
and different tires and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like I can say, yeah. So that's how I would go about writing a game like that.
Yeah, I think research is great. I mean, I've talked about this before. If you do something that's actually based on like real life modern stuff and not so much of a floating fantasy idea, you do have the benefit of research. You can actually just look up how does it actually work in real life and then model it more easily.
Yeah. That's something that you definitely need to do. If you're going to do something that doesn't exist, you need to come up with that.
You need to have a good imagination and an imagination that's still rooted in actual insight and knowledge into how things work.
Mm-hmm. Even if you're going to bend the laws of time and space, like how I did with the plasma gun. So.
Yeah. Well, that's again goes back to that, realistic versus believable versus simulation. It's like, you might be more in believable than in realistic, but it's at least believable now because you're grounding it in whatever you can ground it in. One of the things pet peeve of mine is when you have fantasy stuff where just the basic logic of a world that's populated with all these monsters, people don't live accordingly. They don't live like there are monsters there. They still live the way that, medieval Europe did or something like that. And it's like, there's a certain...
I'm still kind of pissed off that magic hasn't been science-ified yet. Like, that's just something that always threw me for a loop. Like, D&D magic should be able to have the scientific method done to it.
Yeah, I would say that the way they do it, yeah.
You should be able to take a man off the street and have him apply knowledge that we have compiled and turn him into a mage.
Yeah, I think the way that they handle magic, that should be possible. There's other kinds of systems of magic or ideas of magic where that...
But the wizard should be able to be anybody.
Yeah, it's an interesting how you can start to apply logic to something that's as fantasy. You'll get guys that come in and say, it's magic. What the fuck are you talking about? Just make it no rules, make it so it doesn't make any sense.
Hand-wavium. That's what we like to call that.
Yeah, exactly.
Just waving your hand. If it's magic, I ain't gotta explain shit. But yeah, the first thing you want to do is figure out if you pick an end goal, like, I want to make racing into combat, or I want to make racing, I want to make racing like a thing. Like, what aspects of racing are we going to be doing? Are we going to be doing all aspects of racing? NASCAR, drifts, sprint cars, truck racing, dirt bikes? Like, what are we drifting?
And are you worried about, like, the career side of it, or just as, as an activity, like, you want to involve the career of being a race driver, or is it just, all of that kind of stuff? You end up...
And then you break it down into what equipment is involved in this pursuit.
What's relevant?
Usually the vehicle, like, for us take archery. In archery, you need a bow, at least. So you look at what can be modified on a bow, what aspects are variables and what aspects are not variables, but constants, okay?
Right.
The arrow is usually a constant. It isn't, the arrow usually change all that much. It does a little because it depends on what the arrow's made out of and how long it is, but that doesn't, what it's made out of matters a little bit. What it's, how long it is more so in line with the arm's length of a person, so that can be ignored. But things like tension, but pull weight, those things will change numbers and things like that. With cars, you say, okay, what kind of engine do you have? What type of engine do you have? Because, an inline 6 might not be able to take certain upgrades over a V12. Like,
yeah.
You go through and you research these things and you research this and that and the other and you figure out what are the major components of cars that can change and essentially will affect either how fast you can turn, how fast you can go straight, or how fast, or the things you want to do with a car. What affects what? Once you get those things down, then you can start, looking into different aspects of the same object.
Yeah, but if you're not designing a game that's about, obsessively figuring out car logic, then keep it as simple as it needs to be to work within your other system that you're working on.
Yes. That's correct. But this is focusing on the main aspect. And this mostly helps with things like rules medium, rules heavy things. If it's rules light, then honestly, we have enough rules light system.
Yeah.
We don't need any more. We don't need a simple
I don't want to hurt anyone's
mechanic.
Feelings, but I kind of feel the same way, yeah.
We don't need, fuck it, I hurt somebody's feelings. If there's no point. We have too many of them. We have too many of them. There's the major ones and the minor ones. Now hear me out when I say rules light. When I say rules light, I mean rules light generic specific. There are already plenty of workable rules light generic rules that exist. They're easy to make and there's tons of them. Rules light specifics, cute for a few games, whatever. If you want to make your little niche game, like Maid is a good one I like to use as an example. Maid is light to medium, but it's very it's got a very specific, like, this is what you do, this is what we do, this is what we are, this is what, it's in this little pocket, Yeah.
It's not going it's not easily replaced by a different one if that's the experience you want to get. That's kind of what I tell people. I don't really care if somebody's doing rules light or rules heavy or whatever. You can make an extremely rules heavy game that ends up being irrelevant because somebody else already did the same thing. What matters is that you're creating an experience that is different, and that experience is going to come out of the mechanics and even the lore and stuff. Even if, lore doesn't matter to some people, it can be the tipping point that changes how you enjoy a game.
Yeah, but it's a whole lot easier to replace lore than it is to replace mechanics.
True, and that's why, you need to have something that is different enough and somebody else can't just come by and easily change.
If somebody can rip, here's the thing, somebody can rip your setting out, this is my opinion, if somebody can rip your setting out, use your mechanics, and make a game that feels the same, generally, you should have probably used either a generic rule set or your shit doesn't really need to exist. Or you should have used a generic rule set from the get-go and just wrote the setting. Because if it's just a standard, roll 2d6, lowest, high is good, we have tons of systems like that. There's a huge, I think what's it called? Fate?
Yeah.
I think that's what Fate does. I could be wrong, but
I think Apocalypse World is kind of the same way.
Yeah, I know Apocalypse World does. That's a better example. Apocalypse World can be used for a lot of shit, where it's very story based, and it replaces a lot of systems because it doesn't care. Like it depends up to the GM to when to apply the roles. If your system isn't mechanically interesting, what's the point of the system?
Yeah, and I've also told people, like, if you have a little system and you're going to be tinkering on it for a long time, and it's not a total game changer that's going to revolutionize RPGs or anything, but you have a bunch of interesting setting ideas, go ahead,
write the setting. Go
ahead and make the settings as if they will fit with your system or whatever, but go ahead and make multiple settings. Do a whole bunch of different settings that work with this system. And be a guy that makes interesting settings or whatever, but don't tie them together too tightly because, people might want to use that setting in a different system. And why would you, if your setting is really the thing you're interested in, try to make it available so that other people can use it in other things. That would actually be cool.
Yeah. To go back to an example that actually Ops fits is that, so Advanced Arms and Shadowrun are actually very close in settings, but I don't get the whole, I'm copying Shadowrun, because I made a bunch of major changes to the magic, funnily enough, that makes it different, that makes Ops and Tactics different from Shadowrun.
Yeah.
It's mechanic, it may have the very similar setting, but mechanically they're night and day.
Yeah.
So,
and, I am going to wrap this up soon, but I do want to know, do you have plans to basically evolve this setting over time?
No. I'm a sandbox. I'm a fan of sandbox. The Great Adventures in Space book, which is a Kandai book, is basically a ginormous. Okay, so real talk, it's an excuse for me. It's an excuse for me to be like, hey, here's all the books, use them, play them, have fun with it. But in reality, it is a ginormous toolbox for a GM to do interesting things with.
Yes. Yeah.
There is no thoughts of evolution.
Right.
Evolve it into what? It's my question.
Yeah, no, I don't know. That's what I was thinking. Is it sounded like, right from the beginning you were saying that you're designing this from the bottom up with as a toolbox, and the implication obviously then is that people are going to bring their own creativity to the setting. And
that's not my job. My job is to give people a snapshot of the equipment and the stuff like that exists in the current time period.
For you, then, the system has to be much more of the fluff and the world lore kind of stuff would have to be much more of a loose framework for, just making sure that anything you want to bullshit, justify why does this exist, why does that exist, it's covered there enough. But it's going to always be the thing that you're only doing as much as you need to, and there's a point at which it's good enough, and you don't need to dump on more lore, because that's, as you said, that's the GM's job and the group's job.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say that's the end of this episode. You're probably gonna want to rant about a whole bunch of stuff. You're gonna have to save it for GDG or wherever else you want to complain about things. Promote your game.
If I'm popular, I'll come back. If I'm not popular, I'll still come back and tell those motherfuckers they can go fuck themselves. Either way, I'll be back.
All right. Thank you very much for coming.
But I'm not gonna, no problem. I'm not gonna monopolize all your time. So go interview somebody else.
I don't want to interview anybody else. We're at 2 hours and 40 minutes now, and I could probably rant for another hour.
Not today, motherfucker. God damn it.
Yeah. All right. You'll be back sometime. I know that. So.
Yeah, I definitely will be back. But if my parting advice, I would suppose, is that make sure your game you make isn't pointless.
Isn't pointless?
Yeah. And that sounds pretty harsh, and it is. Deal with it. But the reality aspect is make sure it needs to be a game. Make sure it's not just a setting with a rule change. Make sure it's not, because even D&D, like the actual like official D&D has multiple settings with rule changes. Castle Ravenholm, Greyhawk, fucking Spelljammer. Like those are all, they all use the same rules, and it goes like D&D, like standard D&D, and it does that. Mm-hmm. So don't be ashamed of, because it's a whole lot better to make a setting than it is to make a fucking fantasy heartbreak.
Yeah, that's true. I think you've got a lot of advice. I don't even know if you realize how much good insight you have.
I have no good insight. I simply say things at random and it sounds good, so I roll with it.
Okay. Well, you can tell yourself that. I'm going to tell people if they want to talk to you on GDG, that I'm sure you can give them some great advice. And that's going to be it for now. See you next time you come on.
Yep. And if you want to read off some tactics and complain about it. Tell me what you hate, because I don't give a shit about what you like. That's
all right. See ya.
All right. This was fun. We should do this again. Bye.
So there you go, part 2 of the amazing SSB, talking about his incredible ops and tactics system. He's done the hard work. He programmed the book in some crazy programming language that we should all probably learn, but none of us will. He's trying to teach us some wisdom, teaching us about what truly, truly terrible RPGs are like, and basically giving us perspective. And that's what I hope you take away from this, as well as the need to email this man and tell him what you think. Contact him, because there's no way a guy like this should be floating out there with no idea how people are reacting to his decisions. He's got such real systems here, such good original content. I mean, if this could be spread out and parsed and presented the right way, this would be something that many people, like thousands and thousands of people, would be very interested in. And that's what I love to see, is a bright mind like this, who's done the hard work for years and years and is setting an example. But we need to show him some support, some love, some hate, some trolling, whatever you want to make it. Just, get involved a little bit, download that stuff, play it with somebody if you can. If you have a group, introduce them to it. Maybe it spreads virally. I don't know. I'm not an expert on these things. I just love talking to these guys, and SSB was a pleasure to talk to. So tune in next time. We'll have tons more with somebody else. Thanks for listening.